The conference room fell silent as Colonel Marcus Ironside Steele slammed his fist on the mahogany table, his weathered face twisted in contempt. "Whisper Fox? What kind of candy-ass call sign is that for a Navy SEAL?" His voice boomed off the walls of the Pentagon briefing room, drawing snickers from several officers seated around the table. "Sounds like something you'd name a stuffed animal, not a goddamn warrior." Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen sat motionless at the far end of the table, her dark eyes steady, her expression unreadable. She'd heard worse, much worse, but something about the way this particular colonel sneered at her, at the call sign she'd earned through blood, sweat, and choices he couldn't begin to understand, made her jaw tighten imperceptibly. She didn't respond. She never did. That's why they called her Whisper Fox. Not because she was soft, but because she moved through the world like smoke through fingers. There, then gone, leaving only results in her wake. "Colonel Steele!" Admiral Richardson's voice cut through the room with surgical precision. "Lieutenant Commander Chen's record speaks for itself. Perhaps we should focus on the mission briefing?" Steele leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his barrel chest. The kind of man who'd spent 30 years in the teams and believed he'd seen everything worth seeing. "Sure, Admiral. Just saying, in my day, call signs meant something. They told you who a person was in the shit. Whisper Fox sounds like she's afraid to make noise when it counts." Sarah's fingers didn't tremble as she opened her mission folder. They never did. Not anymore. Not since Kandahar. Not since she'd learned that sometimes the loudest weapon was silence itself. The briefing continued for another 90 minutes, but the damage was done. Word traveled fast in the tight-knit SEAL community. By evening, half the base had heard about Steele's mockery of the only female SEAL officer to ever lead a Tier 1 unit. Some laughed. Some shook their heads. Most just wondered what the story really was behind that unusual call sign. Because in a world where men were called things like Hammer, Reaper, and Ironside, a woman named Whisper Fox had to have earned it somehow. 3 days later, as Sarah walked through the base commissary at 0600, she noticed him, the janitor everyone called simply Pops. He was maybe 70, maybe 80, with silver hair and hands that trembled slightly as they pushed his cleaning cart. She'd seen him 100 times, always nodded politely, sometimes held doors. She did that for everyone, regardless of rank or station, which was another reason some of the old guard officers found her peculiar. "Morning, Pops," she said, her voice soft but clear. The old man's eyes crinkled with a smile that reached deep into his weathered face. "Morning, Commander. Heard some foolishness about you the other day. Don't pay it no mind." Sarah paused, surprised. "You heard about that?" "Old janitors hear everything, ma'am. Invisible, mostly. Like ghosts." He winked, then his expression grew serious. "But I know something Colonel Steele don't. Something most folks here don't." She tilted her head slightly, curious but not pressing. That was her way. Let people reveal themselves in their own time. Pops glanced around the empty commissary, then lowered his voice. "My granddaughter Lily, 7 years old. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. Been fighting it for 3 years now." His voice cracked slightly. "Her mama, my daughter, died giving birth to her. Her daddy couldn't handle it, left when Lily was 2. So it's just me, my Social Security check, and whatever I can make here. But cancer don't care about that." Sarah felt something shift in her chest, but her expression remained neutral. She'd learned long ago that people didn't need your tears. They needed your action. 6 months ago, Pops continued, Lily needed this experimental treatment. Only hospital doing it was Johns Hopkins. Insurance wouldn't cover it. Cost was $200,000. He shook his head, eyes glistening. Might as well have been $2 million for a man like me. I was ready to sell everything, my house, my car, my late wife's wedding ring, but it wouldn't have been enough. Not close. What happened? Sarah asked quietly. Someone paid for it. All of it. Anonymous donor, they said. But the hospital administrator let something slip one day when I was thanking them for the 100th time. Said the donation came from a lieutenant commander in the Navy SEALs. Said this person had done the same thing for 11 other kids over the past 4 years. Just quietly, no press, no attention. Used their entire inheritance, combat bonuses, everything. Sarah's jaw tightened. Pops, I ain't stupid, Commander. I done my research. There's only one female lieutenant commander in the SEALs, and the timing matched up perfect with when you came back from that deployment in Syria. His eyes were fierce now, protective. Lily's been in remission for 5 months. She's gonna make it, because of you. I don't know what you're talking about, Sarah said softly. But there was no conviction in the denial. Yes, you do. And I know why they call you Whisper Fox, too. I asked around, real quiet-like. Found an old Master Chief who served with you in Afghanistan. He told me about Kandahar, about what you did that nobody talks about. Sarah's breath caught. Memories flooding back, the village, the children, the impossible choice. That afternoon, Colonel Steele was in the officers' lounge, holding court with his usual crowd, still making jokes about Whisper Fox and what he called the softening of the teams. The laughter was harsh, masculine, the kind that made men feel big by making others feel small. The door opened, and Pops walked in pushing his cleaning cart. The officers barely glanced at him. He was part of the furniture, invisible in the way that service workers often are to those who consider themselves important. But Pops didn't start cleaning. Instead, he walked directly up to Colonel Steele's table and stopped. The laughter died. "Colonel Steele," Pops said, his voice stronger than anyone had ever heard it. "I got something to say, and you're gonna listen." Steele's face reddened. "Oh man, I don't know who the hell you think—" "In Kandahar, August 2019, Pops interrupted louder now. Lieutenant Commander Chen's team was extracting a high-value target. Intel said he was alone in a compound. But when they breached, there were 15 children inside. Hostages. The target was using them as human shields. The room had gone completely silent. The standing order was to complete the mission. The target was too important. But Commander Chen refused to risk those kids. She went in alone, no weapon, hands up, and she talked to that man for 6 hours. She spoke to him in his own language about his family, his mother, his children. She whispered to him about mercy and redemption until he let those children go. Every single one. Steele's face had lost its color. The rescue team wanted to take the shot while she was in there. She ordered them to stand down. Said she'd rather die than have a single child caught in crossfire. That terrorist eventually surrendered without firing a shot. And you know what her commanding officer said when he heard about it? He said she moved through that situation like a fox, smart, patient, deadly when she needed to be. And she did it all in a whisper, because sometimes the quietest voice carries the most power. Pops turned his gaze around the room, landing on each officer. But that ain't even why I'm here. I'm here because Commander Chen took her entire inheritance, money from her parents who died in a car crash, and her combat pay from 5 deployments. And she's been using it to pay for cancer treatments for kids whose families got no other hope. 12 children, including my granddaughter. She ain't never told nobody, ain't never asked for recognition, just did it because it needed doing. He looked back at Steele. So when you mock her call sign, Colonel, what you're really mocking is the kind of courage that values life over ego, the kind of strength that don't need to announce itself. You're mocking a woman who's more of a warrior than you'll ever understand. Pops picked up his cleaning cart and walked toward the door. Before he left, he turned back. "Oh, and Colonel? My granddaughter drew you a picture, Commander Chen. She draws pictures for her guardian angel every week. Didn't know who you were till yesterday, but I told her this morning. She's gonna meet you someday and say thank you proper. Maybe then you'll understand what a real hero looks like." The door closed behind him, leaving absolute silence. Colonel Steele sat frozen, his face a battlefield of emotions, shame, disbelief, something that might have been respect fighting through decades of rigid thinking. Around him, officers stared at their drinks, at the floor, anywhere but at each other. Finally, Steele stood up and walked out without a word. 2 hours later, Sarah was in the training facility when she heard boots approaching. She turned to find Colonel Steele standing in the doorway, looking smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of his own judgment. "Commander Chen," he said, voice rough, "I owe you an apology." "No, sir, you don't," Sarah replied calmly. "You didn't know?" "That's exactly why I do," Steele said, stepping closer. "I made assumptions based on ignorance and pride. That's not leadership. That's ego." He paused, struggling with words that didn't come naturally. What you did in Kandahar, what you've done for those kids, that's real courage. The kind I forgot existed somewhere along the way. Sarah met his eyes steadily. With respect, Colonel, I didn't do anything special. I just did what needed doing. Those kids needed someone to choose them. Those families needed hope. It wasn't courage. It was just being human? No, Steele said firmly. It was both. And I was wrong. About you, about that call sign, about what strength looks like. He extended his hand. I hope you'll accept my apology. Sarah shook his hand. Already forgotten, sir. But they both knew it wasn't forgotten. It was forgiven, which was different, and harder and more important. Word of the confrontation spread through the base faster than the original mockery had. Within days, Sarah found her locker decorated with hand-drawn pictures from Pops's granddaughter and 11 other children, notes from their families. Gratitude that brought tears to eyes that had seen too much to cry easily. She kept only one picture, a crayon drawing of a fox surrounded by stars, with the words, "My guardian angel," written in a child's careful hand. And when she led her next mission, every operator on her team wore a small fox patch on their vest. Not because she asked them to, but because they understood finally what Whisper Fox really meant. It meant that the most powerful warriors aren't always the loudest. Sometimes they're the ones who move through darkness bringing light, who choose mercy without losing their edge, who understand that true strength is measured not in how hard you can hit, but in what you're willing to sacrifice for those who can't fight for themselves. Colonel Steele never mocked another call sign again, and sometimes late at night in the officers' lounge, you could hear him telling younger SEALs about the real meaning of courage, the kind that whispers instead of shouts, the kind that gives instead of takes, the kind that makes the world better simply by moving through it with intention and grace, the kind that belongs to a warrior named Whisper Fox,